And if you feel comfortable, turn to your neighbor and say, I don't care if you mess up.
I don't care if you have that.
Oh, thanks. If you see your brother standing by the road with a heavy load from the seeds he sowed, and if you see your sister falling by the way, just stop and say, you're going the wrong way. You've got to try kindness. Oh, kindness. Shine your light on everyone you see. And if you try kindness, blindness of narrow-minded people who don't know Rotary. Don't walk around now down and out. Lend a helping hand instead of doubt. And the kindness that you show every day will help someone along the way. You've got to try a little kindness. Oh, a little kindness. Shine your light on everyone you see. And if you try, you'll overcome the blindness of narrow-minded people who don't know Rotary. Narrow-minded people who don't know Rotary.
Please be seated. Can you remember what it's like to be a child? Here are 7 reasons to view the world through a child's eyes. 1, everything is new. Children are excited to wake up, whereas you may dread your upcoming day. Each day is new to a child and full of possibilities. Treat each day as a clean slate and anything can happen. Everything is a learning experience. Children are interested in learning, mostly. A child might ask why over and over and over again. They want to know everything. We should all keep learning. 3rd, everyone is a possible friend. Children are almost always open to meeting new people. Embrace this mindset when you're meeting someone new. 4th, you think positively. Children can be comfortable faced with a new situation, especially if it's presented as if it's an adventure. Some of the parents in the room are nodding on that one. Start thinking of mundane tasks as an adventure and be excited about the possibilities and especially finishing those tasks. 5th, you can do anything. What do you want to be when you grow up? How many different answers did we have to that? Doctor one day, teacher another. I even talked about collecting garbage so that I could hang on the back of one of those trucks. That looked really cool to me. We often pick career paths or change jobs because we think we should, not because we have the passion. Think like a child and do what you want. 6th, we do things just because. When was the last time you sat outside in the sun and just let your mind wander? Or played on a swing set, or went down a slide? Try something different. And lastly, we don't really care what others think, or at least that's what children model for us. Let's be honest, this is the best part of being a kid, isn't it? Getting dressed in that polka dot shirt and striped pants because that's what you want to wear, and you dress yourself, that's what kids do. Imagine how free you'd feel if you didn't care what other people thought about you. Don't always worry about what others will think. Maybe everyone loves your striped and polka dots after all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Nancy and Jevin and Linda. Appreciate you kicking off our meeting in that great way. I'd like to also thank our greeters for today, John Hojaboom and Ken Colling. Our meeting reporter is called Paul Casey. Thank you for that. And our Sergeant at Arms, of course, is Ken Grant. Now, we have one piece of club business to take care of at the top of our meeting. In prior communication through the Rotary newsletter, and then again yesterday via email, you received changes to our club bylaws that your board has voted to recommend to the members for approval. Past President Jimmy Collins spearheaded this effort. I want to thank him for all the tireless hours he put into this work and is joining us via Zoom to share the highlights. Jimmy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, President Beth. Can you hear me in the room?
Yes, I do one more test.
Test 1, 2.
Thank you.
Okay, good deal. Thanks. Well, good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and club members. As President Beth has mentioned, we do need to act on a proposal by the club board of directors to ratify their approval of the new bylaws. Our last vote like this was in 2019. And since that time, state laws have changed and Rotary International has adopted some changes, and our club has even stopped having an audit committee, if you will. And so it's time that we clean those sorts of details up. Beth, thanks for reminding us that we've had plenty of opportunities to review the bylaws that are recommended. We've been fortunate. Perkins Coie, a great local firm represented in our club by several members, including past President Carl Legge, who arranged this engagement by the Perkins partner in nonprofit law, Tony McCormick. Today, the board is asking for you to vote to ratify. And we'll ask you to raise your hand if you're in the room, because you'll be asked to vote for or against. And then if you're on Zoom like I am, we'll ask you either to raise your hand so that I can count, or if you don't have your camera on, please use your reaction along the bottom of the screen to raise your hand so we can count you when President Beth asks for the vote. So President Beth, I move that we adopt, as has been recommended by the club board of directors, the new state law compliant board or bylaws, and would ask that the members vote once it's been seconded by my colleague Dave Siebert, who has assisted with this review, and then we'll move on with the program. So I move that we place this for a vote.
And I'll second.
You, Jimmy and Dave. All right, we will call for the vote. All in favor of approving the bylaws as presented, please raise your hand. I was wondering, Ken, if you were abstaining. Thank you. All right, we're good. All right, Jimmy, you got the count on Zoom? Excellent. All right, the motion is approved and unanimously. Thank you so much for your participation in that. Jimmy, thank you again for your hard work on this program. I really appreciate that effort.
And Dave's and Tony's as well. Thanks.
All right, next up, I am very pleased that we have a new member introduction to bring to the club. Jane Pryor has been a member of the Seattle Rotary for 15 years and serves on our member classification committee. Please welcome Jane to the stage to introduce new member Tony Chen.
There you are. I get the clicker. So I'd like to introduce Tony Chen, Classification Investments, as a new Seattle Rotarian. Tony comes to us from the Rotary Club of Pleasanton, California, where he was a member from 2013 to 2018. Tony was referred to our club by Dwayne Rudd, a member of the Rotary Club of West Seattle and a past district governor. So although Tony came to Seattle from California, he was born in Raleigh, North Carolina. His family lived there for 3 years before his father, an engineer at Corning Glass, was transferred to the company town in Corning, New York. In Corning, Tony spent an enjoyable childhood, the middle child in a family of 3 children. After earning his Bachelor's of Science degree at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Tony went on to earn a PhD at UC Berkeley in solid state physics. I asked him what that really meant, and he said, the study of matter. Now you are informed. He later worked for tech company Lam Research Corporation as an engineer, manager, and a director. After joining Rotary in Pleasanton, Tony served as chair of his club's International Service Committee and is most proud of his achievements in raising funds for the club's foundation during his 2-year tenure as its president. The foundation partnered with the Bering Foundation, founded by former Seahawks owner Ken Bering, and other local Rotary clubs to fund need-based scholarships for high school students, grants to local nonprofit organizations, and purchase and distribute wheelchairs in South America. Tony participated in club trips to Chile, Mexico, and St. Lucia while a member there, and he caught a few fish along the way. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. After living almost 30 years in California, Tony changed his career and he moved. He created his own investment advisory service, ALC Capital Management, of which he's president. This may seem like a surprising shift from engineering, but Tony has always been an investor and continues to use his engineering background in his new business. And even better, he really enjoys it. Then he moved to West Seattle 4 years ago, just before the pandemic. So Tony has a 25-year-old daughter who lives in New York, where she is a graduate student in bioengineering. Tony loves to fish and has caught just about everything that swims, he says, in both fresh and salt water. He also enjoys tennis. I'm looking at you, and which he played in high school, and a good time. He enjoys a good game of poker with friends. Tony looks forward to making new friends and connections at Rotary. He wants to help revitalize downtown, join the education committee, and offer his financial services to our club and foundation. When I asked Tony what he'd most like his fellow Rotarians to know about him, he said, I enjoy learning and want to get quite involved in the community and Rotary. I strongly believe in Rotary's principles and the 4-way test. Welcome, Tony.
Welcome, Tony. We're so pleased to have you as a member of our club. I wanted to also just introduce a handful of guests that we have here today. As I call your name, if you would please stand so that we can recognize you. We'll do it at the end. We have Tyler Johnson with Washington Lift Truck, and Tyler is a potential member. Tyler, welcome. And we have Adira Steinbach with Chase Bank. She's also a potential member. Adira is a guest of Linda Lowry. Thank you, Linda, for bringing a potential member here. Adira is also a longtime Rotarian from Colorado, so we're excited to have you here. And then we have another potential member, Veronica Garbe. Welcome. And Veronica is in the aerospace purchasing planner. That's her role. And then lastly, we have Natasha Collins. She is Senior Major Gifts Officer with Classical King. Welcome. Natasha is also a potential member and a guest of Barton DeLacy. So welcome all of you. We are thrilled to have you join us today. All right. And thank you, Jane, for that great introduction of Tony today. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our main speaker today. Rosalys Peel has been a respected voice in the childbirth education movement for over 40 years. She is a registered nurse, graduate of the University of Washington, and certified by Lamaze International and the Relationship Research Institute. She recently retired from teaching parent education classes at Swedish Medical Center in Seattle after 30 plus years. Now, in June of 2011, her beloved husband of 45 years, Michael, died of Alzheimer's. 3 years later, she returned once again to face Alzheimer's, but this time with journal notes and pen in hand. Over the next 3 years, she wrote the story of their life as husband and wife who hoped beyond hope that they could continue to live together at home throughout the course of her husband's illness. There were many unknowns for Mike and Rosalys during their 9.5-year journey with Alzheimer's. Mike and Me is designed to be a bridge that gap for couples who are now in that chapter in their life. She tenderly guides the reader through stories, journal notes, and insights, and shares what happened and how they dealt with each unknown along the way. Please welcome Rosalys Peel.
Get my props ready there. So thank you for that nice introduction. I'm impressed she even got how to pronounce my name right. That's usually one of the tougher parts, Rosalys. And I am thrilled to be here. Thanks to Linda, who was at a West Seattle meeting about 10 months ago. I talked to her and she made this all possible. And being at the Rainier Club is a special treat for me. I walked by it many years on my way up to Swedish Hospital. And so today I came up from the ferry again. I'm a Bainbridge resident. This time I was hauling books and kind of incredible for me. I just have to say I'm overwhelmed by the beauty of the room. And it just so happens yesterday was 12 years since Mike passed away. So who would have thought that 12 years ago, I'd be at the Rainier building talking to all of you and that I've published a book. So very different hat, as you know, from the introduction from Beth, because I come from an RN background and a parent educator. And one of the things you discover when you have something like Alzheimer's come into your life, you discover what the gifts are you have that you bring to it. So one of the gifts that I had that was a surprise, it wasn't that I was an RN. I'd never cared for anybody with Alzheimer's or had experiences with anybody with Alzheimer's, but it was that actually I was a parent educator of all things. So I knew about child development and growth and development and stages and phases. And that turned out to be key because as Mike went through the illness, I was able to take that information and kind of go, oh, that's where we are right now. I never thought of him as a 3 or 4-year-old. I never treated him like a 3 or 4-year-old, but I did learn there were times when his skill set was at that level and we learned how to do things that way. The other thing that was pretty incredible, John Gottman, who some of you may be familiar with, well-known a relationship researcher, came to Swedish Hospital about the same time Mike got diagnosed. He got diagnosed in 2002. And he asked for some of the educators to get involved in creating a program for new parents with the idea that one of the times that becomes very difficult for relationships is around the birth of a baby. And we know that 2/3 of the couples have less marital satisfaction 3 years after a babies are born, and 1/3 are as happier. And he wanted us to teach couples what they could do to keep their relationship strong. So lo and behold, I'm teaching that at Swedish Hospital to new parents. And then I'm going home to Mike and saying, you need to give up the car keys. And he's telling me no. And I'm thinking, okay, I know how to do this better. So that's the two things that I brought, which were pretty incredible. Knowledge about how to keep our relationship on track, and the other fact about child development. And so those are all part of the story that came into play when this whole thing started for Mike and I. Mike, on the other hand, had different gifts. He was shorter than I. He was about 5 inches shorter. So he happened to have a great sense of humor. I don't know if it's because he was a little guy. He was a federal agent for customs, worked right down here, down the street at the federal building. When he retired, he was the head of the internal affairs for the Northwest region. So this is obviously before Homeland Security came into play. So he was kind of a strong-willed sort of person. And so when the diagnosis came, we were both kind of thrown off track. Needless to say, we both had a lot of fears. My fears were that he'd run away, he'd harm me, that he wouldn't know me, and certainly that he wouldn't love me at the end of life. So those were my big fears. Mike's big fear, I found out many months later because he was just grumpy at first. I couldn't say much to him without him being grumpy. And one day we were out in the yard and I'd said something and again, he snapped at me. And so I went over to him and I said, hey, what's going on? And he said, I don't want to leave you and our home. So that was his deal. It wasn't the things I was worried about. He was worried about leaving me and our home. So at that point, I kind of responded sort of quickly and I said, I think we can do this at home. And so we made a deal out in the yard saying we're going to do this at home. And I kind of wondered, can I hold that deal up? Is that going to happen? And I did revise it a little bit. I said, we'll do it at home as long as it's safe for you and safe for me. So that was the deal. And I can honestly tell you, I did not know if we were going to be able to do this at home or not. So we kind of took year by year and eventually month by month. And in the end, honest and truly, it was day by day. Are we going to finish this up at home or not? So he was diagnosed in 2002, died in 2011. The doctor told us it would probably be about a 9-year journey. And that's interesting because when I talk to people, when they tell me, I say, when were you diagnosed? They give me the year they were diagnosed, but they always say, but we knew this much longer, much longer. So I would say most people know much longer, but the figure we worked with was from the time of diagnosis till death, about 9 years, and he lived 9.5 years. She said the first 7 years will probably be easier. The last 2 will be the most difficult, and she nailed it exactly. So for us, that was the case. So on to the book. This is the book, Mike and Me. And for those of you who are here, you've got a bookmark. And just want to tell you a little bit about the book, because during Mike's illness, I was taking journal notes. And when the doctor said to me, you're doing this a little different than some people, you should write about this someday, I started journaling a little more. So before I was talking more about my emotions and feelings, and once she gave me that tip, I started writing more about what we were doing and what was working, what was helpful. So if I ever wrote a book, I'd have journal notes to tell me what might help somebody else. So I started keeping a little better journal. Over time, I was using these notebooks. You've all seen them, the green, yellow, blue ones that are about this big, spiral, about this wide. I had 7 of those notebooks, 7 of those journals. So after Mike passed away, about 3 years later, it takes that long to recover, I headed over to Montana. Montana's where Mike's dad had a little cabin and we inherited years ago. It's over by Kalispell. So I went over to the cabin. I have my 7 notebooks and I want my book to do everything. I want time frame for people. I want how to do it, suggestions, ideas. And let me tell you, I'm not a writer. I'd never written anything before. I'm a childbirth educator. I actually love what I'm doing right now. I like presenting, but writing, I was way over my head. So I kind of walked away from that thinking, maybe this could be a brochure, I never dreamt it was going to be this with an award-winning sticker on it, let me tell you. And on my way home, I left early out of this cabin outside Mountain Brook up against the Swan Range. And I stopped in Coeur d'Alene. I was trying to get to Seattle, a 1-day drive. And I stopped in Coeur d'Alene at a stop Mike and I liked because there was an outhouse there. And at that time, there weren't as many family-friendly restrooms. So that little outhouse was great and had a monument. And I kind of walked up the hill. It was October, kind of misty, not good weather. And there were these concrete statues I'd never seen. I was trying to figure them out. And a fellow was coming down the hill, had his dog on a leash, and kind of trying to pull the dog back. The dog's heading right for me. I'm assessing it and I'm thinking, it looks okay. And so the fellow came up and I said to him, what are these monuments about? And he said, oh, they're from 911. They were a gift to us over here. And I said, oh, I said, that's interesting. I'm trying to make a 1-day drive from Montana to Seattle and just needed to get out and stretch. He said, oh, I'm from Kingston. He said, you know, he lived in Kingston. I said, oh, I'm from Bainbridge. And I said, how'd you get over here? And he said, I'm a book mentor. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. He was a book mentor. I didn't know what a book mentor was, but it sounded like somebody I wanted to get to know, you know? So I told him what I was doing, and he said, oh, I can help you with that. And so as he was leaving, he gave me a business card. And as he was leaving, he said, if I don't hear from you, have a good life. And I said, you'll hear from me unless I mess up your email address, you know? And anyway, he ended up contacting me. He found me because I was also teaching Lamaze Getaway Weekends over to B&B on the peninsula. So he looked me up online. I had not contacted him yet. And I have to say, my kids were putting up red flags all over the way. Mom, what are you doing here? So looked him up right away. He is the gentleman who started the company Compendium. I had one of his books on my coffee table. You probably have some around too. It's an inspirational book company. His name is Dan Zadra. So I am very happy to have Dan Zadra's name on the cover of the book with me, my publisher, my mentor, and just the person who helped figure out how we put this material together. First thing he told me is, don't write anything. Once we agreed after a number of phone calls that we would work together, don't write anything. Figure out what your voice is and who you're talking to. What do you have to say that other people haven't said? So we took about 3 months figuring that out and figuring out the format. And then he said, okay, start writing your stories. Just write your stories. They were all in the journals. What happened? How did we do it? So the problem was when I'd write a story, I wanted to put an educational component in there. And it didn't work. My voice changed too much. So what we figured out was we'd have stories and then insights at the end. That's the how-to. And then the great thing is we figured out we could implant journal notes in there. So you actually can hear Mike's voice and what was happening when. So when I talk about speech in a chapter, I talk about what it was like as Mike was losing his speech in certain situations. And then in there, there's plugged in journal notes during the years, how his speech was changing, which was a beautiful way to present the material. So people who get the book, in fact, what they can do is they can look at the front of the book, which are all these wonderful little chapters, at least I think they are. Discovering Mike had Alzheimer's is a whole section, preparing for the road ahead, forming our circle of support. Let me tell you, could not have done this without all the wonderful people, neighbors who would have a teenage daughter and spend a couple of hours sitting by Mike's bed when I was out in the yard, you know, towards the end, and she'd read something or do some homework, and just a couple of hours made it possible for me to be outdoors. And anyhow, learning how to compensate, that's about eating together, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole group of stories there, which are really fun. So I've got 2 more little tasks today, and I'm watching my time, and I know Ken's going to help me out with that. But one is to give you a feel for one of the stories. And the other is I want to come back and kind of let you know a little bit more about what's new on the home front for Alzheimer's and the good news about Alzheimer's. So looking at stories, I bounce around all over the place. One was laughter, because Mike's laughter was huge. We now know that makes a big difference. Laughter does. Another one was on mobility and just thinking about how we figured out what we could do, thinking about that developmental stage. And I'll just give you a couple of little tricks that I learned then. When Mike really hit the ability like a 3 or 4-year-old, I just fell on learning how I help my kids get dressed. And I put that in the book. And, you know, you probably remember some of these, you know, with a little guy when they're 3 or younger, you're trying to help them get dressed. You know, the trick of helping them get their feet in the right place and then letting them pull up the pants and say, great, you did it. The other trick of laying out their clothes, you know, put them in the right order so they're not picking out. I love the example. I think it was talking about polka dot shirts and striped pants. We certainly had those in our life. But, you know, just laying out the clothes for the children, that was a good hint. Eating out, that was when I remembered again about the children. And it was like, gosh, eating out's getting difficult because he couldn't read the menu. He didn't know what he wanted. The waiters were asking him for him to answer. It was very awkward. And I just went, well, what did I do when the kids were little? Ah, finger foods. Finger foods were great. We need to pick out the food ahead of time. You know, it's basic: chicken, meat, vegetable. What would you like? Do you want pasta? And, you know, use some kind of pictures for him before we went out. And then he could get me in the right category. And we didn't go out for formal dinners anymore. We learned to go out for lunch. And so we could continue doing these things with certain tools that I had figured out, and Mike was willing to go along with them. I'll give you one more chapter example. One of our toughest arguments, I will say, oh, there were many, however, but one that was really hard early on was when the doctor told him he shouldn't drive anymore. That is huge. That is huge. That's a common difficulty for everybody when you're told you can't drive anymore. So we were at loggerheads on that for an extended period of time. And then I got back to what I knew from Gottman couple relationships, and I had to back off, just back off. And I knew what I needed to do was figure out Mike's perspective about not driving, and he needed to figure out my perspective. That took us months to get there, down to 5 minutes, guys. So at any rate, we did get there. The final one that helped me most is I called the Alzheimer's Association. So just want you to know they're there. They're better than ever before. They have a call-in line 24/7. Their suggestion was to have a third party be involved in making that decision, somebody who would drive with Mike regularly. And getting the diagnosis of Alzheimer's does not mean you cannot drive anymore, which came to us from the UW. Somebody there told Mike, because he had the diagnosis, he could not drive anymore. It just means you need to continue to assess the situation. Okay, jumping from some of the stories, each of those have a separate story, and I love them, and I hope some of you are going to want to get a book. It is designed to be a guide. It's a great gift to give to anybody, not if they're just helping with Alzheimer's. It's a wonderful gift to give to people, and there are books outside that you can get. So jumping from there, just kind of a little update. They're doing lots of research now. The funds that have gone in for Alzheimer's have really increased. They've increased 7-fold since Mike was diagnosed. So I just want to make sure I've got the figure right on this. So right now, the federal government and Alzheimer's Association, they're putting in $3.7 billion in 2023. Alzheimer's has been low on the list for curing and solving. We've done great with cancer. Woo, we've helped with HIV. A lot of things have been taken care of. Alzheimer's is not. And it has to do with it's not a savvy disease to take care of. Dr. Young always ran late for Mike's appointment, about an hour and a half or more. You do not see somebody with Alzheimer's in a 7-minute appointment. You've got the partner and you've got the person. So at any rate, that's one of the problems. What we do know that is absolutely making a difference today is lifestyle choices, as you may know. They have comparison studies with people who are in early stages of Alzheimer's, those who follow lifestyle choices and those who do not. They can find a significant difference after a year with just lifestyle choices. And you probably know them. One is diet, Mediterranean diet. What we had for lunch today is incredible. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains. Exercise is the number one. Your brain likes the same thing as your heart likes. When you exercise, you increase the circulation to your brain likes it. Social, that's what you're doing here. You all get an A in social. Interacting, being with other people, laughing at the beginning, sharing stories. Super, just what you want to do. Cognitive is what you hear most about. Cognitive is crossword puzzles, keeping your brain active, learning new things. The one that they have not talked about much, and I'm so excited because I put it in the book, is sleep. Sleep, we know our brain needs to sleep. We need rest. Mike did so much better with that afternoon nap, a real nap. Go in the bedroom, turn the lights down, close the curtains, crack the door, put on the music, give him a nap in the afternoon, and then he did pretty well in the evening, did pretty well without the nap. It was fall apart time. So obviously so much more I could say, but I know we're going to open it up to questions. So I think I'm going to let Ken, I think I'm right on the money, aren't I? Oh, good. I got a thumbs up. I can stay up here. I didn't take time to walk down. I thought I could see all of you well. I better stay right here. So let's see what you've got for me. Thank you.
you for coming. I've heard that music helps in Alzheimer's. Is that true?
It's huge. It's huge. And I just had to smile with what you did for music at the beginning. And Glenn Campbell, that's a beautiful story. There's a movie out there you can see about Glenn Campbell. And as soon as I heard his name, I got a little tearful. Incredible story. Music is huge. And it's also, you know, that endorphins and feeling good. And people will remember music late in life, even if they don't remember other things. Huge.
Did you?
Well, I was going to also ask you about music, but I'll instead tell you a little story. My mother had Alzheimer's, and as she neared the end of life, she was in her home. She had lots that was familiar. She was losing her speech, but we would sing to her, and up to 1 week before her death, and she had Lewy body dementia, Alzheimer's, and strokes, but she could sing all the lyrics to some of her favorite songs.
Yes.
Up to 1 week before her death. And we sang her out on the day she died.
It's a
And
beautiful
she
story.
survived 2.5 hours longer than the hospice nurse thought was possible just because of the singing. It was so, so helpful.
It's really special.
Other questions?
Got somebody over here.
Well, I'm going this way. I have one for you. Sorry, my voice is a little bit hoarse. Does your book address, you mentioned it, like your family, the people around you and the impact, and how do you
Absolutely huge.
like train them up on what you're learning so that they don't kind
Absolutely
of blow your
huge. What I would say is the book is a good way to get people up to speed with what you're trying to do and what it's about and what it can mean to the couple. I did not say it right at the beginning. I don't think we had none of those things fear come true. Mike knew me at the end of life and we were very much in love. And I did not know that we had a hospice nurse. Well, we had a caregiver 1 day a week so I could keep working, which was my sanity. And one night I came home from work and I said, you know, we're doing okay, but when Mike doesn't know me, I don't know if I can do this. And she said, oh, that's not always the case. Nobody had told me that would be possible. Somebody recently said to my son, it must have been hard when your dad didn't know you. And Patrick responded quickly, he knew me right at the end. So it wasn't just me who believed that. We know that was true. So that's part of the story. We need to talk about that story. Yeah.
Jeff Borick, thank you for being here with us today. I just wanted to ask if you could touch a bit more on what else your book says about sleep, because I've actually been looking into this too recently. And the one tip I can offer is that devices to monitor your sleep cycle are becoming super important.
Yes.
Because I thought I was getting plenty of sleep because I was in bed for 8-9 hours.
Right.
But after starting to monitor this sleep, I realized I'm only sleeping 4.5 hours.
Right.
And I don't have distractions. I don't let my smartphone come in, but the
What-
4 stages are also important. Thank you for
What
being.
I will say is that's one of the first things they did. We knew Mike was having some difficulty. We went through the hearing. And then after that, the doctor said, no, it's not a hearing problem. I need to just stand closer to him. So I had the problem. It wasn't him. So it wasn't hearing. And then they said, let's check out sleep apnea. So we know that sleep apnea can cause changes in the brain and can be a predisposition. So it's real important that you're getting good sleep. So snores in particular, that's something you look for, but the doctors are happy to have you run a test to see if you've got sleep apnea, and it does affect the brain. So other than that, I can just say how we implemented it at home is I started thinking about children and their sleep cycles. And little babies, if you remember, they always wanted a morning nap and an afternoon nap, and sometimes maybe 3 naps as a newborn. And then you get them down to 2 naps a day, and then maybe just 1 nap a day. And all of a sudden, because I'd been lecturing over at Swedish about newborns, and all of a sudden I went, that's what's happening with Mike. He needs more sleep. He's going backwards. So we started adding a nap. We first had a little afternoon nap. And then towards the end, I thought, gosh, you know, by the time he has medication, has breakfast in bed, and he gets up, he's exhausted. So medication, breakfast, get cleaned up, and then a nap in bed, and then get him up. so much better when that medication had time to get on board before I tried to get him up. So, yeah, just learning that. One more word about friends that you referred to. My kids were incredible, just amazing. But two women I'll mention right now from Southern California. We had been up here 25 years when Mike was diagnosed and we got to the end of the illness. And we'd been in Southern California, San Pedro before that with him with customs. And Marilyn called me up one day and said, I want to come help you. She'd never stayed in my home. We're Christmas card connected. She said, no, it's getting tough. I really want to come up. And Claudia wants to come too. And I'm thinking, oh, but the house is a mess and things aren't easy now. And no, they wanted to come. So lo and behold, they trooped up here 3 times the last year. They cooked meals, they told stories, we laughed, we had a great time. And I was so surprised the first trip, we stopped at the pub for lunch on Bainbridge because I had Sabina, the 1 day a week caregiver. And when we walked into the house, Mike had not gone down for a nap. He was waiting for them. And I looked at Sabina, how come he's not resting? And she said, he told me no. And when they came in, he knew them. He was excited about them. He knew that I'd gone to pick them up and did not want to miss them. I'm going to tell you one more story. Do I have time for one more? Okay. So my one more story is a good friend of mine, Marilyn, who I worked with at Swedish, another RN. We taught parent education classes together for years. She retired a while ago because her husband had Lou Gehrig's disease. And they moved down to Lacey, Washington, and live in a very nice residential area. It's a senior living area. They have a very nice community room there that's called Jubilee. And I was invited to go speak down there. And so I went down to see them and went to their home first, had a nice visit. And Mike and me was on their coffee table. Marilyn had tagged different pages and opened it up, and she uses it simply as a resource. And we had a nice visit. And then when I went out in the kitchen, Hugh came out and Hugh said to me, Marilyn's nicer to me now. So what more do I want? If my book helps caregivers and people are nicer, that's the most I could want for.
That's great. I have another question, but did you have one as well, Beth?
That always works.
Yes, okay. Do you have a sense or have you had input from the medical side of the things the steps that you took do you think that had an impact on not only the longevity of his life during that diagnosis, but also his ability to stay connected with you? Is there any research or data behind that?
No, there isn't. Those control studies are really hard to do, stages and phases and what one person did and what one other person did. I just think it was kind of a matching that I had this couple relationship so fresh in my mind and that I was so tuned into child development, and it just happened to come together for us. And Dr. Zhang, who watched us, Dr. Zhang, who's one who said to me, you guys are doing so well, you need to write about this. And Toni Morrison wrote a book, and I don't know where she put it. She said, if there's not a book written about something, you need to write it. And that was a good reminder because I wanted to know when things were going to happen. What do I do? How do I do it? How do you prepare your house? And even recently, I read some things about what do you do to prepare your house? Get ready to cover your mirrors up because they get frightened by seeing themselves. Get high locks on your doors. Hide the car keys. Get guns out of your house. Now, we did remove any guns, and actually it was done before because he was in law enforcement. He had guns, but those were already out of the house. But the doctor mentioned it to him. But some of these things, what we did is we just said, let's see how it goes. And it was, do as much as possible, as long as possible. And we didn't pre-guess how things were going to happen. When do we have to stop traveling? Well, let's see how it goes. I don't think I was over the edge in doing too much, but I was right on the edge. Yeah.
So my last question is this. You mentioned briefly a little bit about how excited you were about the research. Is there a piece of the research that you're really excited about?
There is. And one of the things is all the money and the research that's going in now. And the piece I'm really excited about is a blood test. Wouldn't that be great? They've got some things out there now, but they don't really have this finalized yet. There was a big grant that came to one of the state universities. I don't know if it was Western or Eastern Washington, to study blood tests. And it would be like when you go in and you get your cholesterol checked, you get a blood test and you can see if there's a predisposition to it. They're getting better now about doing some diagnosis with what's called mild cognitive impairment, which, we can all get some of that. And early diagnosis and intervention can make a difference. So they're doing better there. But I read an article that was sent to me from the Arizona Review, and that diagnosis for that man took 3 years, just like it took us. And that's 2002 till right now. The diagnosis is still extremely slow, extremely slow. Okay, thank you. Really fun to be here, and there's books out there. I'd really like to not take them back down.
Rosalys, thank you so much for sharing your story of your journey with Mike. I know that the book is a tremendous gift that you have to share with a lot of people. So thank you for bringing your books here. So they are out in the lobby if anyone is interested afterwards. All right, and Rosalys, in acknowledgement of the generosity of your time here today, we have made a donation in your name to Harvest Against Hunger, and that has contributing 600 servings of healthy produce through Harvest Against Hunger. So thank you for that. Now, as you may recall, one of our newer sponsors to Rotary is Bloodworks Northwest. And I want to recognize club members who stepped up in the month of May to help replenish the very dangerously low blood supplies in our region. So if we can go to that slide with our names. Oh, maybe we don't have the names. Oh, okay. So then hold that thought. Oh, thank you. There you go. So we have Nancy Cahill, Ken Colling, Stan Chrissy, Bob Davidson, Fedva Dickman, Kathy Gibson, Alan Konofsky, and Lori Walker. So thank you to all of those donors. And I do strongly encourage anyone who is able to become a blood donor to do so. I am seeing it so frequently that the supplies are really low, and we need to help replenish that. So thank you for those individuals. And they have snacks, Jeff, you're right. It's the bonus. So, and I would like to acknowledge our gold sponsor, Bob Alexander, for his longtime support of Rotary. So thank you for that. All right. And by the way, if you did not see your name on that list and you did donate in the month of May, please follow up with Stan Chrissy. He is tracking all of that and would love to make sure that you get recognized appropriately. All right, now I am going to call up Mary Goldie. She is going to give both our announcements and share the programs of the next week. You may have noticed that we originally had planned to give a member spotlight today with John Steckler. That has been postponed, and we will be doing that. It'll happen later this month. But in the meantime, we're going to hear from Mary and hear what's all exciting is happening ahead.
Okie dokie. Oh, yes, ma'am. There you go. All right. Click through these. Okay, first one's happening tomorrow. It's the new waterfront walking tour with Bob Donegan. I think we have 30 plus attendees that have signed up, but if you want to join in the fun, meeting at Washington Street Landing at 4:30 p.m. tomorrow. So this will be a good one. I would highly encourage you to skip work early and join the fun. Networking event, Thursday, June 15th on the 8th floor of the Washington Athletic Club. This is going to be a hybrid of golf simulation fun and a business presentation from John Steckler on business growth plans that can be useful for anyone and everyone wanting to make a business growth plan, nonprofit or corporate. So please join us. More details on the website, RSVP. We would love to have you attend. And then this is the one I'm super proud about. The Rotary Club of Seattle walks in the Seattle Pride Parade. We haven't gotten our lineup position yet or the lineup time, but it will probably be around 10 a.m. on Sunday, the 25th. Just know that it's almost 2 miles long. So if you have mobility issues, be aware of that. Be thinking costumes. I lived in New Orleans a long time, so costumes are important. You better be bringing your A game. If you have any questions, send me pictures and I'll let you know if it'll work. But just RSVP with me. I would love to see a good, strong turnout from our club. And this is the really important one because our ticket sales are just kind of getting off the ground now. It's our annual President's Party in honor of Beth Knox. Yay! And that's going to be at Queen City Yacht Club, sports themed, everything. It's going to be a lot of fun as always. And the last club board meeting of the year will be right before the party. So should be a fun time. And then I also wanted to mention June 17th, Wellspring Family Resource Fair. We'll do a longer announcement about it next week, or I'll have a slide for it. And then our upcoming programs we have next week at the Westin. We've been waiting on this one for a long time. David Williams of the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum, and our own club member, Geraldine Brousseau, from Cinnabon to Carn Spring Mills. So she's got some exciting new things going on in the baking world that she can't wait to tell us about. So it'll be good. And then very special meeting, last meeting of the Rotary year. We have our annual district update from our district governor, Kay Peterson, but we also have some very special things happening that day. People may be coming from out of town. I don't know. We'll see. You just have to be there, but I would recommend be at that last meeting on June 21st. Thank you.
My interest is piqued now, Mary. I did want to say that David Williams, I have known David a long time through my years as CEO of Seafair, and he's got so many great stories. He too has written a book and written several books, and has a lot of history about the early days of the hydroplanes back in the 50s and 60s when they were at their heyday. He restores those vintage hydroplanes and just has he's a wonderful storyteller, so you'll appreciate that. All right, so as many of you know, my day job is in sports, so I like to wrap up with a sports report. And I tell you, if you'd taken the results of this last weekend, I had a pretty dismal sports report today. And I confess that I was dreading it on Saturday. I'm like, how am I going to talk about this? But if you zoom out, then there's still a fair amount of good news to talk about in sports. And that's me, right? Okay, so let's start with an impressive run by the Seattle Thunderbirds. They first won the Western Hockey League Championship, which is a big enough deal in of itself. And then they went on to the Canadian Champions League. Who knew that they even played in that? I've learned that. And they ended up placing second. So really impressive run. These guys are maximum age of 25. So really proud of our Seattle Thunderbirds. Now, thankfully, the Mariners bounced back last night after getting swept by the Texas Rangers in the last series. They beat San Diego Padres last night 4-1. We saw a really exciting return of Andres Munoz from the injured reserve list, who came out with his very first pitch after 2 months at 100 miles per hour and went on to strike out 2 of the 3 batters that he faced. So not a bad comeback. So we're looking to see more from Munoz. Now, the Seawolves rugby team, they continue to win. They beat the Utah Warriors and sit in second place in the West, which keeps getting them closer and closer to the playoffs. And likewise, the Storm got off to a rocky start with 4 consecutive losses without their star players, Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart. But last night, they came back. So they went just in time for Rotary. Came back from a 21-point deficit to stun the LA Sparks with the Storm's first win of the season. Now, team captain, this is also a great stat, Jewel Lloyd had her 4th consecutive 25-point game. Now, Jewel leads the WNBA in scoring at 28.8 points per game, which is 5 points per game more than the second leading scorer, Brianna Stewart, former Storm player. So we've got a great player in Jewel Lloyd, and excited to see what this building year with the Storm will be. Now, last Saturday, the Sounders and OL Reign hosted 42,000 fans, which was awesome. And it was a doubleheader on a fabulously sunny day that featured music and entertainment in between the two games. The Sounders match ended in a draw while the Reign lost and slid into 5th place. But if you could have picked a day 25 plus years ago to sell the idea of building a stadium that would host both football and soccer in Seattle, then last Saturday would have been your entire sales pitch. Now, the UW softball team, UW's been just on a roll here. They ended another great season, placing 5th in the College World Series, while the men's baseball team also made the tournament and went 1-2. Now, not to be outdone, the UW men's rowing team took 2nd nationally, losing in the final varsity match to Cal by just over 1 second. Now, outside of our local results, the Ted Lasso series on Apple TV, right, Bill? Along with Ted's AFC Richmond Greyhounds football team has come to an end. I'm not going to share any spoilers, so instead I'll leave you with a quote from Coach Lasso that is appropriate given the mixed bag of wins and losses our Seattle teams have been experiencing. He says, "You know what the happiest animal on earth is?" I know you know. It's a goldfish. You know why? It's got a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish. Meeting adjourned.